So welcome along today, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This session is entitled Becoming a Recognised Provider of Gateway Qualifications for the Essential Digital Skills Qualification. I'm Laura Faulkner from Good Things Foundation. I've met many of you before, and I think lots of you know Alison from Good Things Foundation, Alison who is from the network team, who's on here today as well. Our main speakers today are Paul and Diana from Gateway Qualifications, who I'm going to pass over to now to get started on the session. Just a quick note before we get going, just to say if you could stay on mute, it just stops any background noise. If you'd like to ask any questions, the chat panel's there and we welcome questions throughout the presentation. Paul and Diana will be pausing to answer questions as they go along, and there'll hopefully be some time at the end. We are recording the session, so if you're not happy to be viewed on camera, please do keep your camera off and you're welcome to do that. And I think that's all the housekeeping, and I'll hand over to Paul.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm really delighted you could join us, and many thanks to Good Things Foundations for giving us this opportunity to tell you about our Essential Digital Skills Qualifications, which we've been offering since September 2020. Thanks, Laura. Thanks. Before I start, just a few words about Gateway Qualifications. We've been around for over 30 years, and we have a wide range of regulated qualifications, including many at entry and level 1. We also have access to HE diplomas, and very much our focus is on creating the highest quality qualifications that are accessible to all, whether that be learners who are returning to education, who haven't been in education for many years, whether that's learners with SEND, whether that's learners across the spectrum. And very much we are committed to excellent customer service, which is very personalized, and there's always an opportunity for somebody for you to talk to if you have any queries. Thanks, Laura. So today what we're going to cover is we're going to introduce you to Essential Digital Skills, give you an overview of the support that we have available, tell you how centres are using the qualifications at the moment, and this is based on experience since last August, and outline how you become approved as a centre if you're not a Gateway Qualifications Centre already. Thank you. So first of all, just a reminder that Essential Digital Skills Qualifications are now a legal entitlement. So since August 2020, any adult that doesn't have digital skills, whether none or low digital skills, can enroll on a qualification at entry or level 1. Now, these qualifications are only available at E3 and level 1. They are called Essential Digital Skills, and they need to meet the requirements as laid down by the Department for Education and Ofqual, the regulator. They are now not only funded for adults, they are also fundable for 16 to 19 learners through study programs. But for adults, they are a legal entitlement. Thank you. So just now a few words about the key features of our qualifications. These were very much developed in consultation with a variety of centres, that's adult and community learning, larger FE colleges, training providers. And they told us they wanted one qualification. They wanted to be simple to operate and manageable. And they wanted it to cover both life and work in the same qualification. And they wanted one assessment for manageability. So the assessments are very much covered in authentic, realistic scenarios that your learners could identify with. They could think, oh, well, that's something I really would need to do. Yes, I need to go online and register for something. Yes, I need to do my banking online. Yes, I need to buy something and pay for it. So very realistic scenarios, which many of you may already be familiar with from working with Good Things Foundation. The assessment is online and on demand. So your learners can take the assessment whenever they are ready to do so. There is an initial assessment tool, which is available for free on our website, which means you can go on and say, now, is the learner ready already to do set entry 3 or level 1, or do they need perhaps an introductory program first? We test knowledge through multiple choice questions, and that's very much the strand of essential digital skill relating to safety. And also what's important is assessments can be taken on different devices. So it doesn't have to be in a computer suite. It could be that you have laptops that you make available to your learners. They could do them on that. And one of the things we do provide as well, which is really helpful, and those who've already achieved have told us, is mock tests. So a learner can go online, take the mock test, and actually get the full experience. And we're also told they are very easy and quick to mark. And I think that's also very important if you're thinking about time factors. Also, I would add, so far, we've had a significant number of learners who've actually come through and achieved. And what's very interesting is the average age. The most recent awarding meeting we held, the average age was around 45. And what we're seeing, which is really encouraging, is a very high success rate amongst learners, because I think initially there was quite a lot of fear about doing a qualification, but really very, very encouraging to see the breadth of different learners who are taking essential digital skills. Thank you. So the qualifications are 45 guided learning hours at each level. As I mentioned, they cover life and work, but each qualification also covers the 5 strands of the national standards. So if you're not familiar with the national standards, it would be useful, Laura, I think, to maybe make those available to everybody so they can look at them. And what we need to cover is most of the skill statements in each strand. There are elements of the national standards which we determine would be difficult to cover, so we have left those out. But the majority of statements in the essential digital skills standards, we are covering in the assessment. At E3, it's very much about digital skills for life, but there is an introduction to skills for work. And that is primarily in the context that we're using. And at level 1, it's a balance between skills for life and work. So there will be context for somebody who perhaps needs digital skills to get into a job. And particularly now, as a result of the pandemic, where the way we work is changing, we're trying to reflect that in our assessments. They very much, in fact, all the ones that are currently live reflect the fact we're in a pandemic. They reflect the limitations that have been put upon us and the kind of activities that learners are having to do. We're all seeing lots of notices about things opening up shortly. Any of us who are registered with perhaps a local museum will have had an email to say they're reopening. But what we know in most cases is even for now, we're being asked to book and book online. So the number of things we're having to do online has grown exponentially since the pandemic. Thanks. So in terms of the structure, each assessment is one component, but there are parts within it. So learners would sit at a laptop or a computer for an hour and 30 minutes for E3 and an hour and 45 for level 1, but we are saying that they should have a supervised break in between, because to rest their eyes a bit, just have a drink, have a break. And it is the tutors who supervise. We're not expecting these assessments to be invigilated in the typical invigilation way, but more a tutor supervising learners. And at the moment, because of the pandemic, we have also got learners who are actually taking these remotely, sitting in their bedrooms, supervised by a tutor. So that we have allowed because of the current situation, because we know that many smaller organizations, many adult community learning cannot at present get into the centers. I noticed Laura at the beginning said some of you are already back in a center. We know that is not always the case. I was talking to adult and community learning last week, and they don't know when they're going back, because in many cases they are dependent on other organizations to let them back into their buildings. So that's also something that can happen. The mock can be taken remotely. The teaching can all be done remotely, as can the assessment. And at entry 3, it's 44 marks total. And at level 1, it is 54 marks. Thank you. So one of the things that we decided was we thought there were certain skills that were really, really important. In particular, we're talking about those who so far have found it difficult to communicate online, not very familiar with social media. And we thought for them, it was important. They also knew how to perhaps get the most out of their phone that they had, whatever phone they had, whether they had a Chromebook and a tablet, whatever they had, to be able to take it into class or show it to a tutor remotely and actually learn how to get the best out of it. One of the things that's required is to apply system settings. So making perhaps the print bigger, changing the display, changing the time, or even changing the language. And that's something that's assessed by the tutor. So once the learners have been taught, that can be assessed, mark awarded, and the tutor makes a comment as to what setting the learner changed. Very important that learners can build contacts with people they communicate with, whether that's just their tutor or whether that's with members of the family. And perhaps they're not all that familiar how to not only create a contact, but also to edit it and make a change. So in this particular case, and it is very much up to the tutor to determine the context. It could be via text messaging, it could be via email. The learners create the contact and then edit it. And the evidence from the tutor's perspective is they actually see the contact that they have created. And the other one, which is really essential now, and obviously that is how much of the teaching has been going on, is initiating and participating in a video call. Now that could be any application that is appropriate to the learners. So that could be WhatsApp, it could be Skype, it could be Teams, FaceTime, whatever it is that the learners have access to and the tutor has access. So it's about teaching them how to engage in a video call, how to set one up, speak for a bit, and then terminate the call. So I think those are the type of activities we think are really essential. And we know there's lots on Learn My Way to help learners do that. Thank you. In terms of the assessment, it's taken on Surpass through web delivery. Now, Surpass is very easy to use in the sense that the centres are provided with a link for learners. And the reason we're using this platform is that it provides opportunity to search the internet. So one of the things, if any of you are familiar with perhaps functional skills, where learners have taken tests online, in those cases, they haven't been able to access the internet. In this case, during the assessment, it's very important learners can access the internet, whether that's to search for key information, could be for train times once everybody's traveling again. It could be for opening hours of a chemist, a surgery, a library. So lots of scope there for practical activities to teach learners how, if they're not yet aware, how to search the internet. And they will do that in live time during the assessment. The assessments can be taken in classroom. They can be taken, as I said, remotely at the moment during COVID, certainly till the end of July, or it can be done in the workplace. One of the things we thought was really important, we know that there are a lot of learners who have English as a second language, and we have said that learners can have access to a bilingual dictionary during the assessment. So we thought that was really something that was essential. The tasks are written by the awarding organisation, and that's a requirement, but the teachers mark them and they quality assure them themselves with internal verification. And we, the awarding organisation, carry out the external quality assurance. Centres told us they would rather mark them themselves than have us mark them. So I thought that was quite interesting. And if any of you wish to find out what the arrangements are during COVID for the remainder of this year, there are, in fact, we can send you the details of all the arrangements we put in place. They're all on our website. The EQAs remotely sample the work, so there's no coming into a centre, providing samples, because everything is available online. And these assessments are mark-based, and that was also a requirement, so that if a learner doesn't do very well, I'll take the example E3, if they don't do so well in create and edit, but they're really good at some of the more basic transacting, they're beginning to know how to use their device, they're beginning to understand the requirements around safety, they could still achieve a pass. And I have to say the pass rate has been really encouraging, in particular at E3. We set the pass marks, and they are around at E3 70% to pass. Thank you. I thought now it would be helpful to give you some examples of some of the support materials that we have provided for these qualifications. You can see, first of all, I'll show you some assessments, and you can see how they link to the support materials. So in this case, learners are actually buying something and using a credit card. And what we do is we provide the credit card. So in a similar way, they might have the credit card beside them, they've got one on screen, and they need to understand how to put in the essential information. So they need to know how a credit card works, or any kind of debit card, and also how to create a direct debit. There are also, as I mentioned before, some multiple choice questions, and you can see an example. This is a level 1, where there are 1 correct answer and 3 incorrect. And at E3, there are only 2 incorrect answers, and that is deliberate for E3 to make it more accessible. So that's just one example of some assessments. And thank you, Laura. And here's another example. This is from the sample paper, buying train tickets. So learners learning how to fill in forms. One of the things you'll see in the strand relating to transacting is the ability to fill in a form. And we all know recently how many times we've had to fill in a form online, whether it's for, as I said before, for the library, to go somewhere, to perhaps set up an online shopping. And here's an example here of learners also having to create passwords. And we also say, please tell learners not to use their own password. Create one, but they have to understand that if it says on a website you need to create a password that's got at least 8 characters, they need to know to do that, include a number, could be a symbol. So you can see here an example of an assessment. And then, of course, if it's level 1, we're looking at work activities. One of the things they might do is create a spreadsheet, but all the tasks are really straightforwardly laid out. Learners can see exactly how many marks are available for each question. And the mark scheme itself is very straightforward to apply. You can see exactly what is required. And certainly the feedback we're now getting from centres who have already got some experience is that applying the mark scheme is very straightforward. Thank you. Moving on now, we have got some resources that we are providing, and you can see this is entry 3, unit 4, transacting. So we have created resources for each strand, and there are resources at E3 and level 1, and also maybe of help to those who register. We've also got resources for those who are not working yet at E3, who need that additional time. Now, in some cases, you will find there are references to the website Learn My Way, where there's very good examples. So we've basically created resources which enable you, using other freely available resources, the ability to actually really go from start to finish. Tutors could take these resources and use them for all their delivery of essential digital skills, whether that's at E3 or level 1. So I think, what we've been trying to do is create a way for tutors who are not specialists. And I think that's another thing I'd like to mention. We don't expect the tutors to be IT specialists. Certainly, many of the centres are telling us that tutors who currently deliver basic skills are now delivering essential digital skills. And the ETF, the Education and Training Foundation, has also got online courses for tutors. So it's very much accessible to a wider range of tutors if you're thinking, well, actually, who would deliver this? Thank you. So I've already mentioned some of our comprehensive free support, but just to go over, so there's an initial assessment tool. There are guides for centres and learners, guides on how to run the qualifications, guides on how to use Surpass, the online platform, and guides for learner as well. And they are very much with lots of screenshots, images, talking them through. Once a centre registers with us, they get training on how to standardize their marking, and we've got resources available as well for those centres. The teaching resources I've already mentioned. There is a glossary for learners, and we think that's important with all the keywords you need if you are learning about digital skills. And we also think that tutors can take these, give them to learners, and they can make them their own because we've made them available as Word documents so they can edit them. And if it isn't a learner's first language, English, they can put sort of translations or whatever they think will help them. There is a dedicated landing page for EDSQ, which I'll show you in a minute, which means you just go on our website and it gives you all the up-to-date information. We run regular webinars, not only introductory webinars, but other webinars to support tutors at every stage. And we provide a chief examiner's report, which provides encouragement as to what's going well and gives tips to tutors on things they could do to improve the learner's experience. Thank you. So here you can see some of the resources we've developed. There are different resources. For example, you might say, well, what about ESOL and digital skills? That's obviously about embedding digital skills in ESOL delivery. But these are very much all the different resources I've mentioned, as well as the teaching resources that I think are very useful for tutors and also for learners, because there are lots of learner activities in them. And finally, the last page, thank you, is the link to our landing page, and also gives you more information about EDSQ. And we will, of course, just later on in the webinar, I'm going to hand over to Paul, and he is going to tell you how you would go about becoming a centre as well. Thank you. So Paul, I'm handing over.
Thank you, Diana. I wonder if there's a good point, but there's a few questions I've seen pop up in the chat, which I think it'd be a good time to take them. Then we'll take another question and answer session towards the end. So everybody who's on today's webinar, hello, and please keep posting your questions in, irrespective of what that feels. If it's a very simple question, it doesn't matter. We want you to get the best out of today's session. I actually fully endorse. There was a comment on the chat which says it's everything we do now, but with a qualification. That's great, and that's actually absolutely right. I completely agree that, and particularly the pandemic has probably accelerated the use of digital literacy and the need for it. There's a question here, a few questions, Diana, about what qualifications the tutors must hold, and I think you've touched on that already. But if there's anything else you want to add on that, Diana?
No, I think what we are assuming is that it will be tutors who are experienced delivering to learners working at that level. So if tutors are already working with learners at entry level, but are not IT specialists, they can obviously do CPD to deliver, but we are not requiring centres to show proof that the tutors have all got IT qualifications.
There's another question in the chat about resits. So can a learner resit an assessment should they fail? Absolutely,
but what we are saying is please wait 10 days and make sure the learners get some more learning before teaching and learning before then, because obviously tutors will know the marks that learners got. They will know from having marked the work where they need more support. So I think that's really important. They don't just resit again with a similar outcome. But as I said, at entry level, we have been really encouraged by the pass rate to date. And we've seen some really good examples of learner work, and even in things like create and edit, where learners have obviously actually enjoyed the experience of creating documents.
Thanks, Diana. There's a question here about, you talked earlier about the adaptations due to the pandemic and delivering the assessment remotely. And that's actually, the question is, how's the assessment supervised remotely? Now, I know we have comprehensive guidance on our website about that, so I know you can give a short answer, but what I will do, Laura, is I'll circulate to you so you can send round to colleagues a direct link to our website from that aren't directly answer that question, but Diana, you can just cover that now if you want to.
Yes, just to say, obviously, we have given some guidance to the tutors. I think people have said they're doing it with perhaps 3 or 4 and no more. You know, the key thing is that they can see the learner at all times while the learner is doing it. It also means that if there are technical issues, the tutor is also there to support the learner. So it is actually quite important. But they are able to do the mock first and have a practice run before they actually do the live one. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. There's another question here, really. I mean, Laura's posted in about to say there's a CPD session for teaching staff by Good Things Foundation in June. There's a question about is the GLH mandatory for learners? Well, actually, it's not mandatory. GLH is guided. It's guided learning hours. The funding policy all attached to GLH. And there's a sort of, I mean, how you evidence GLH as a centre is entirely down to you, which could be a register with the learners and the contact time you have with them. Could be one way of doing it. I think we've covered most of those questions now. What I will do, if we can move on to the next slide now, Laura, then we'll take another little question session at the end, and do continue to post those questions in. So funding policy, you know, funding drives all behaviour. And so it's important for us to understand the funding that sits around this. So I'm going to talk about the funding policy in England. I know I saw colleagues on today's session from outside England, across the UK, but this is particularly about funding policy for England. So as you'd expect, the DfE have found this as a real important element to support digital literacy, and so the qualifications are funded for adults as a legal entitlement. Diana's already touched on to that, and they're approved for funding to 16 to 19-year-olds. So digital literacy is a really important element. However, what you can see on your screen now is this was a public announcement in December last year. The existing qualifications at entry 3 and level 1, which were built on the 2006 standards, are going to be defunded from the 1st of August or 31st of July this year. So 1st of August onwards, qualifications at entry 3 and level 1 in the ICT sector, essential digital skills, are the qualifications that are going to be supported and funded by the Department of Education and the Education Skills Funding Agency. So if you're currently delivering ICT qualifications at entry 3, entry 2, entry 1, and at level 1, I would strongly advise you to consider moving to essential digital skills qualifications to start to align with the academic year if you use public funding to support them. And this policy impacts the entire sector. So it impacts us as an awarding organisation and every other awarding organisation. So it's not unique to us at Gateway Qualifications. So that's quite a change in policy tact, and the funding is driving people's behaviour to use essential digital skills qualifications at entry 3 and level 1. Just one thing to mention on that, there are some qualifications at level 1 that will continue to be funded from the 1st of August, and they are ones which are linked to a directly to a job, an occupational route. Apart from that, everything else will be defunded. Thanks, Laura. For those of you who do actively participate in using public sector funding to support your delivery, there is sometimes a bit of a confusion out there about a qualification type such as a legal entitlement, which what we're talking about today. So a legal entitlement means that for essential digital skills qualifications, whether a learner is employed, unemployed, they are fully funded for this qualification, and the funding rate is £300 per learner per qualification. But you can also include other qualifications as part of a cohesive package, and they are funded on what's called local flexibility. So you could develop a package, and I've got some examples of packages in a minute. You could develop packages that include units, short qualifications, and also essential digital skills. So whatever the context, whatever the starting point, you have the ability to nest that in. This is a direct quote from the national funding rules in England for adult education budget, and that's where I get that from. There's sorry, I just got distracted by the chat. So the funding rate for adults is £300 per learner. And the funding rate, that's the base funding rate. So dependent where you're located in the country, sometimes there's an uplift. There's two uplifts, an area cost uplift, dependent on where you're located. Sometimes it's to reflect the additional costs associated with delivery in your area. And also there is a disadvantage funding uplift for learners based on their home postcode. And again, that's additional funding to reflect the additional training and support that those learners may need. Thank you, Laura. So next few slides are how are centres implementing essential digital skills. So this is what we're getting to hear from different centres around the country. And on the next slide really does give you sort of some headlines that you can see. So Diana mentioned earlier in today's session, she talked about initially it was that everything was always focused on adults, but now the funding policy has included 16 to 19-year-olds. So irrespective of where younger people are, essential digital skills can be implemented in a range of different ways. And I think one or two of the things which surprised us a little was actually about helping people prepare to come back to educational settings. We provide access to HE, which is a level 3 program to progress people onto higher education. And actually a lot of those learners didn't have the digital literacy they need to be able to participate in education. That's just how technology and the use of devices in education has just accelerated recently. So there's a range of different ways that they can be implemented. SWAPs, sector-based work academy programs, is a key initiative of the Job Centre and the Department of Work and Pensions to get people into work where employers are recruiting. A very important part of the COVID response and for economic recovery. And I have got some examples in the next few slides of how they are being delivered. Thanks, Laura. So I've got a few examples here. So on the screen you've got at the moment is an example of how essential digital skills could be implemented in a traineeship program. Before I just talk through that, one thing to say, if any of you access adult education budget, it mandates the use of initial assessment in English and maths. It always has done for quite some time, but now it mandates the initial assessment of digital literacy. And in the traineeship section on the funding rules for adult education budgets, it actually is very explicit about you must ensure that you assess the digital literacy of people entering onto a traineeship program. So as you can see, you can deploy traineeships for 16 to 18 learners, and also for older learners up to 19 to 24. You'll notice there's a funding advantage to be had if they're adults rather than 16 to 18, just due to the funding methodology. I don't need to go into the detail of that now, but typically what you're seeing on the screen is the activities, the induction and work preparation, the work placement itself are actually non-qualification activities, which is activities that you support the individuals with. There's some maths and English, which is often done through functional skills, and it includes the essential digital skills. So if you are delivering traineeships, particularly to 19 to 24-year-olds, you actually attract additional funding because you're delivering essential digital skills as part of your traineeship package. So that's an important element. So that's one example of how centres are using them. The next slide gives you an example of just within a program where a learner may have been referred from the job centre, so an unemployed adult. And what I'm showing you here is how you could nest a program together, build a program. So you've got essential digital skills level 1, so that's the legal entitlement. There's this national funding rate, £300. And there's an example of one of our short awards in digital skills for work at level 2. So they've progressed on to a level 2. And there's a customer service skills unit. So that's a unit within the qualification that's funded at £100, and a presentation skills unit. So this could be developed as a cohesive package to support an unemployed adult, which may have a job opportunity. And this could be an example of the package that's put together by you as a centre. Those three elements, the digital skills for work, customer service skills, and presentation skills, are all funded under local flexibility, and the essential digital skills is funded as a legal entitlement qualification. The next one is to support an ESOL learner. So this is a good example. Many of our centres that work with us for ESOL choose to deploy the award in living and working in the UK. It nests together very well. But as you can see there, if you can deploy that, you've got the entry 3 essential digital skills qualifications. So there's £900 of funding without any uplifts attached to that. So there's another example of how you could nest essential digital skills as part of your ESOL offer. Digital literacy and ESOL goes together very well. And as Diana already mentioned, we have guides to support the delivery of digital and ESOL as a part of a package. Next slide is an example of sector-based work academy program swaps. So these are typically very popular at the moment. These are sectors where employers are recruiting in logistics, health and social care, construction. The example at the bottom, that some of you may have the question about, can we deliver the entry 3 and essential digital skills qualifications and progress the same learner onto the level 1? Absolutely, yes, you can. There's nothing to stop you doing that. So you can build programs to whatever you want to support what your learners need. And generally speaking, they're normally funded. I'm always happy to help on funding. But these are typically programs that we've designed, worked with our centres to design, which directly align to vacancies to get people into work. So if you're not involved in sector-based work academy programs, do speak to your local job centre to see if there's a way you can get involved. Obviously, you need to have access to adult education budget, but that's a key initiative of the Department of Work and Pensions. And my last example is an example of a typical study program for a 16 to 19 learner. So if any of you are involved in a study program, they tend to be a long program in excess of 600 hours. There's a core aim in that program, which is the first qualification you can see. So this is typically a level 1 study program for a young person. often in a FE college, but not always exclusively in an FE college, where they'd choose to include essential digital skills as part of that offer, English and maths, and some work experience. So there's just an example of that. And I know colleges, speaking to FE colleges, they are planning to deploy essential digital skills as part of a study program offer for next year. I think we all have the perception that young people aged 16 to 19 already have that digital literacy skill. They may have some elements of it, but maybe not all the 5 skill areas in the national standards. So it will depend on the initial assessment process that you take people through. I see there's a question about AEB. I'll cover that off in a minute for you. Next slide is probably a really key one. What have centres been telling us about lessons learned since implementing essential digital skills at the start of the academic year? Really, they were delivering in anger from September. We had the qualifications went live from August. Certainly a centre-wide approach, dependent on the size of your organisation. The things that have worked very well is where you do offer it right across your centre. So whether you offer that as a standalone offer, whether you embed that in existing vocational learning, whether that's in ESOL learning, whatever the type of delivery, look at your existing adults now. It's not always about recruiting new learners. This is about adding additionality to your existing offer. Certainly staff training is a key element, so actually, if you think about your own staff that are delivering, whether that's vocational ESOL or whatever programs they're delivering now, when you make certain that your staff are aware of the national standards, do you need to develop your own staff training program to help and support that? Diana mentioned about the Education Training Foundation. They have a CPD program for staff. And there'll be other ways that you might be able to do it yourself. So there is a perception that you have to use ICT specialist staff. You don't. The important thing to make this a success is actually use your existing teaching staff, but make sure you give them the skills so they can teach digital literacy. That's an important element. The marketing push is don't forget about your referral agents. So you make certain that the people who refer to you, particularly organisations like the Job Centre, know that you're offering essential digital skills qualifications. Digital literacy is an important element, for universal credit and claimants, having the digital literacy to do the most basic things, important things in life, make them aware of that. Diana touched on this earlier, where we've seen great success, very, very high achievement rates, is learners are very well prepared. They're taught about digital standards, the digital literacy, but importantly, they go through the mock assessment. So the assessment really takes them through the functionality, puts them at ease, so they know how to navigate and access the assessment, and they can access that assessment as soon as learners are registered. And of course, the other element to assessment is about initial assessment. Ensure that you do that initial assessment and you start them on the right level. Is obviously a key thing, because obviously there's the 5 areas of the national skills standards, and so some people may be stronger in other areas and maybe not so strong in others, and you can adapt your teaching programs to suit that. So there's some of the key things. The next slide is powerful, because this is what we're all here about. As a charitable organisation, our charitable objects are about widening participation in education and given accessibility. And actually, these are quotes from learners that have gone through essential digital skills qualifications with some of our centres. And actually, it's really powerful. And that's what we're here for. There are, on the next slide, we've got some other Diana talked about what do you do when learners aren't ready for essential digital skills. You take people through an initial assessment process, and actually they may be some way from essential digital skills. Of course, you've got Learn My Way, which is a very good offer to support people in different starting points. We also have other qualifications that directly support essential digital skills, and there's some examples there. We have done some webinars recently, and later on in the presentation there's some links. If you want to catch up on any of those webinars, we can go into more detail about them. So there's options for you to do that as well. And of course, the next slide just gives you examples of what you need to think about. What do you do with learners once they've gone through essential digital skills? You know, obviously you need to be thinking about digital literacy, moving on at level 1, level 2, but these will often be linked to job roles, not just specifically digital literacy. And they might be, as you can see on the 2 bullets there, really consolidate and improving your baseline skills and also specialist digital skills that align to occupational job roles. Again, we've done separate webinars on these, and again, they are available for you to view on demand. All you need to do is sign up, and there's the details towards the end of this presentation. I can see some questions in my right, on my screen onto my right, and I can answer some of those in a minute. But before I do that, I just want to talk you through about if you want to work with us. So on the next step slide, Laura, thank you. So if you're an existing centre of Gateway Qualifications and you want to become approved for essential digital skills, you will normally have, you have a business development contact, and they will support you with an application process. If you are new to us, you're not a Gateway Qualifications centre, what we do for all centres who want to work with us, we run through a finance check. We do that behind the scenes. We speak to you about what you want to deliver. We talk to you about your staffing resources you have in place, and we support you with that. And then again, you just complete an application form online, and then you're then approved, but you have to attend the delivering and assessing session. That is a mandatory session that is delivered by our team, because that sets you off in the right way. What we don't want to do is set you off, you become approved for a qualification, and then you haven't got the onboarding support. That's a really important element of what we do. There's straightforward processes to do that. The cost of becoming a centre with Gateway Qualifications is £750 per annum. Included in that £750 is your normal 2 quality assurance visits by an EQA, and also for any other qualifications you want to become approved for, that's all included. There's no other additional costs except for the normal qualification registration fee, which includes certification, and that varies dependent on the qualification that you want to access. So we are very competitive on price. We keep our prices as low as possible to keep, support that charitable object of widening participation, but at the same time we can't run it at a loss. So I'm sure you understand. So they're typically the steps that you would take through if you wanted to work with us for essential digital skills. And my next slide is just the business development team. Obviously, you can see myself there in the bottom right, but that just shows you the areas, the territories. Our business development team cover territories, geographical areas, and the color coding. You can contact them direct. There's all their contact details there, and they can take you through your initial inquiry and support you however you want to move forward. So on that presentation, you'll be able to jump onto that named individual, and their email address will come up from you on that. And just before we go to questions, As I already mentioned, onboarding and continued support is really important. What we don't do is leave you unattended and unsupported. It's about you go through the delivering and assessing training, which is mandatory. We then provide you additional onboarding sessions, which are not mandatory, but there's weekly sessions that we make available. And we have a dedicated essential digital skills qualifications team, right from principal EQA to EDSQ, EQAs, and also a customer excellence team, as well as the business development team. So we've got your back, is what I'm trying to say. It's very important, the onboarding, particularly when you bring a new qualification type to the sector, and which is what this is. And the next slide is just the links to the other webinars that I've talked about and referenced earlier that you can catch up on demand. Now, I know there's some further questions. So the very last slide is sort of takes questions, and there's a few things that I can see in the chat. So if it's okay with you, Laura, I'll sort of try to continue as mine host with the questions.
Yeah, that's absolutely great, John. I think we've covered absolutely loads. We've got about 4 minutes or so time for questions.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. I'm aware of time. Thank you. Access to our adult education budget. So adult education budget is a budget that is either grant funded to FE colleges and adult community learning providers, or it is procured through a tendering process for independent training providers or other types of organisation. If your centre doesn't access adult education budget at the moment, there is opportunities to speak to grant funded organisations or other organisations that have an adult education budget, and you could subcontract from them, which would be one way. I saw that there's some comments in the chat about, we can't access AEB. Well, actually, sometimes you can. The government publish organisations that subcontract public funding out. A quick Google search and you'd find it. There's a question about in Scotland, would this attract funding? Well, actually, funding. Obviously, devolution of 4 home countries, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland. There's different funding arrangements in place, different regulatory, and obviously in Scotland, you'd need to work through SQA and how that works. I used to do some work in Scotland in a different role, but I'm not familiar with that. But certainly the qualifications and the funding I've been talked about is predominantly England. They are approved for funding for delivery in Wales from Qualifications in Wales. How long will it take to become an approved centre after reapply? Well, it's as quick as you want to move, to be quite honest with you. So if you make an application, and one of the business development team will support you with the application process, it's all online, and dependent on how quick you respond, and if you can answer all the questions and provide your staff details and resources and how many learners you're expecting, and you meet all the things that we require, we can turn things around in a 2 or 3 week window. There was an earlier question I mentioned, was asked about where do we access the resources. When you become an approved centre with Gateway Qualifications, every qualification you become approved for, any resources sit in an online library effectively called Prism. So Prism is a portal that's used for many things, but one of the things it is used for you as customers is actually you can access and download all the resources attached to a qualification. I think we've answered
Well,
the majority of questions, I believe.
Paul, there's one on administration and paperwork. I think what everybody has been saying is that actually once they get started, once they know what they're doing, because there's a sampling process, but once centers are experienced, it really doesn't take that long. So the important thing is the tutor marks it, an IV samples it, and then they tell Gateway that they're ready to be externally quality assured, and all the work is already on Surpass, so they don't have to upload any work, because we just go in, our EQAs go in and look at the work and confirm that the marking is correct, send a message to the center when that is the case. And there was another question about, can you tell the learners how they've done? Obviously, you cannot tell learners whether they've passed or not till the work has been externally quality assured. However, having marked work and seen the evidence, you can say to learners the areas you feel they need more support if you think a learner is not likely to meet the pass threshold.
There are a few questions. So just to sort of finish on that, there's a few questions about, when you want to become a centre, there's questions about UK PRN numbers. Because we're regulated by Ofqual. There is rigor attached in our application process because we're regulated, and there's certain things that we have to do. So as I already mentioned to you, we do a financial check. We need to know how many learners you're expecting to work with. Do you have access to public funding? If you have access to public funding, we want to see those contracts. We have to ensure that you have the infrastructure in place to deliver. So we're not trying to be difficult, but when you're at work in a regulated environment, we have to play within the constraints of what that brings to us as well. But we're also, very friendly, happy to help and support wherever possible. And sometimes, sometimes we'll signpost your other organisations that may be delivering, you might be able to work collaboratively together. There's always ways to make things work. Generally there is. So that's what I'm trying. I don't think there's anything else we've got, Laura. I think that's it from us, really.
That's really helpful. There's an awful lot of information there that's been really helpful. I know it's an awful lot to take in, so we will be sharing the slides with everybody, which has those contact details and clickable links in there for you to come back to John and Gateway on anything, Paul and Gateway on anything there. Some of the things that have come up in the chat panel are being addressed as part of the Essential Digital Skills series, and I've dropped the link to register on any of these webinars into the chat panel now, but you can see there's a few coming up on things like funding and skills training for tutors. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions on that by emailing me at laura.faulkner@goodthingsfoundation.org. And I will just say thank you for your time today. I know we're slightly over time, so if you have to log off, thank you very much for being with us, and have a nice rest of your day. Thank you very much. Thank you to Paul and Diana for giving us your time to explain all that. It's been really helpful. You can see a few people clapping on the screen there.
Pleasure. Thank you, Laura. We've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice day.